You are listening to a Roamcast with Neil Kramer.
The lone wolf belongs to the wilderness.
Yes, sir.
You must not grow up to be a lone wolf.
No, sir.
You are a member of the village. No! You are a unit of society. No!
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Why is everything so shit? Why is everything so dilapidated and perverse? Why are people so irrational? Why the constant deceptions in all areas of society? How can it all be so hideous, so disgusting, so broken? The absurdity, the corruption, the hypocrisy, and the lies. The sickening lies. To try and make sense of these things, let us first set a foundation. To love what is true, to uphold it, to cherish it, to discern it, is a devotional practice. It is not a passive circumstance. To actively and gratefully accept the love of truth is central to spiritual well-being. Not optional, not a luxury, not reserved for the wise, just essential, everyday, spiritual breathing. Love truth. To love what is good, to recognize the moral and the natural, to conduct oneself with propriety, humility, maturity, with love, is the bedrock of spiritual behavior. Personally, socially, universally. Love goodness. To love God, to investigate and examine the reality of this mysterious divine creator, to pursue his nature and being, to observe his teachings, to cultivate right relationship with him, to honor his gift of life, is the heart of existence itself. Without God, we have nothing, less than nothing. With God, we come to life in divine reality. Love God. Love truth. Love goodness. Love God. What is it to love? What is love? Love is understanding. Love is closeness. Love is union. Love is transformation. Love is justice. Love is burning. Love is life, everlasting, outside space and time. Someone who is determined to be soft, gentle, kind and tolerant, with no negatives, with no conflict, no judgment, is someone who knows very little about love. Such a person is really a nervous absconder, retreating from reality at the first signs of suffering and sorrow. They dread these great visceral tides. Suffering is the revelation of falsehood. Suffering is a product of spiritual combustion. Sorrow, the ashen proof of purification. Without both, there can be no humility, no learning. Trials produce steadfastness. Steadfastness produces maturity. Maturity characterizes spiritual wholeness. These truths were crystallized 2,000 years ago, enunciated by great teachers, given to us for our contemplation and nourishment. Steadfastness, today rather an old-fashioned word, means not only to be unswerving and unwavering and resolute and such like, it also means to be loyal and constant. Loyalty in the face of trouble and difficulty. This is really what spiritual life is all about. Demonstrating over a lifetime, beyond question, that you attended with lucid presence. Genuine mental, emotional and spiritual care. Assiduous in being, in spite of the odds. Notwithstanding the avalanches of opposition and distraction and intimidation, when you were tempted left and right to give up, tempted to elevate fantasy narratives of self-interest over truth, but you didn't. You loved truth, you loved goodness, and you loved God. You loved them, and you sought to understand them in the deepest ways, even when you didn't have to. You loved true things, even when they had fallen out of favour. You loved goodness, even when it was outright condemned. You loved God when his name made people laugh and roll their eyes and jeer and hate. These things did not deter your love. Indeed, it burned all the brighter, hotter, longer. Let us turn our mind now to inversion. To turn something inside out or upside down, to reverse from the natural position. Inversion is the chief weapon of the adversary. This is why inversion characterizes the lunacy of today's mainstream society, because the adversary is here, for a short time. An actual spiritual being, a real entity, not a mythological figure, a genuine living presence. And the adversary underwrites inversion. Inversion is loving falsehood, not truth. Inversion is loving debasement, not goodness. Inversion is loving self and world, not God. Inversion purposefully misconceives reality, inside out and upside down. It is a rearranging of the natural order, a calculated deviation from reality. Wokeism, liberalism, leftism, humanism, relativism are all forms of inversion, deviations from reality. Sexual deviation, gender deviation, class deviation, racial deviation, cultural deviation, historical deviation, moral, rational, divine deviation. All inversions. Most world institutions teach inversion. Educational, scientific, medical, legal, governmental, you name it. 1,000 global dysfunctional organizations hurting people every day. And they are dysfunctional not because of falling standards or generational decline, but rather by design, crooked from the outset. The seed of inversion, deliberately sown beneath their roots from the beginning. An intentional policy to propagate deviation, to knowingly enact evil. When I was travelling recently, a friend showed me a paper questionnaire they'd received in the mail from the ACLU, encouraging people towards inversion, finding racism where there is no racism. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The toxic falsehoods. The ACLU, for non-American listeners, which is many of you I know of course, is the American Civil Liberties Union, an organisation that is supposed to protect civil and constitutional rights and personal freedoms and stuff like that. But that's not really what they do or what they're for. The goal of the ACLU, whether most of their members know it or not, is inversion. The civil liberties baloney is just a cover. Like with BLM or Antifa or LGBT or the CDC, the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, the Democrats, climate change. They don't really give a shit about African heritage people, the working class, gays, healthcare, justice, society, or the environment. They couldn't care less about those things. They barely know what they even are. They only give the appearance of caring. But the abomination of inversion, with all its inherent repugnant deviations, bristles behind their mouldy papier-mâché disguises. The evil can be observed readily, if one looks carefully and honestly. After a while it's easy to recognise. The bitter mildew permeates everything. The greater metaphysical purpose of inversion is to sever the relationship between the individual and God, to cut people off from their divine heritage, to pretend the universal creator, the master teacher, the loving father of mankind doesn't exist, to ridicule him, to deny him, to reject him, to fasten his existence and character to the garbled institutions of the church, so people will throw the baby out with the bathwater. And in the yawning vacuum left by the absence of a divine creator, a substitution is made. Self. Self becomes God. Narcissistic, empty, destructive. Without God, people start to lie. Lying to themselves mostly, but also to each other. Mentally, emotionally, they invert. Inversion is lying. Inversion summons people to both idolize and hurt themselves by deliberately misapprehending reality. And COVID, our favourite made-up malady, revealed this grim catalogue of inversions that most people have long since chosen for themselves. People becoming irrational over COVID wasn't just a sudden phenomena that ignited in recent times. Inversion is something people have been doing for a very long time. Some secretly and unobtrusively, and some with unashamed excess. Think of the upside-down position modern governments take on guns, on capital punishment, on abortion, on sexual deviancy. They are mostly anti-gun, anti-capital punishment, pro-abortion, pro-sexual deviancy. Inversion. Everyone knows these things are wrong. Even the people drinking the Kool-Aid, deep down they know. They just never admit it. Such is their hubris. It is sad and exhausting and fascinating and foreseeable to witness the world in such a supremely maladjusted state. Such extreme dishonesty. The live streaming spectacle of a post-truth, post-virtue, post-reality world. Affectedness and insincerity now fashionable. Untruth now desirable. regular people, our own friends and family, actively and proudly forsaking reality, withdrawing ever deeper into their own tranquilizing theatre. To deliberately live in ignorance in order to just get along is a very callous and malevolent thing to do. To recite venomous delusions about gender, race, class, medicine, foreign wars, just going with the program and supporting the current thing. Very destructive, very decadent, unacceptable for anyone over the age of 14? Have you ever witnessed an adult credibly justify how it's okay to fervently advocate for something that they haven't really understood or verified for themselves? Let us return to our original question. Why is everything so shit? And before we continue, someone might well think, what an unfortunate way to begin a podcast with an expletive. Not very family friendly, is it? And especially for someone who has a decent vocabulary. Well, of course I considered that. And in this case I felt this particular opening sentence was warranted, because it is a question that has been directly put to me several times over the last 18 months with precisely that wording. Intelligent, considerate, sensitive people have asked me exactly that question in that manner, thoughtfully executed in expressing the depth of feeling of something. In this case, the exasperation, the insanity, the evil of the world. And for me, this inquiry into the horribleness of everything has been a central driving force in my spiritual life. No kidding. I was, and am, serious, deadly serious, about finding answers to this conundrum. So let me ask it one more time and propose an answer. Why is everything so shit? Short answer, because the majority of people give up. They resign their spiritual commission all too readily. They yield to the fallenness that's all around them and become part of the problem. They become evil. Fallenness essentially being earth in its current temporal aspect. A world subject to time, in which, necessarily, everything must decay. This being a God-given test in sustaining goodness in a world of corruption. Temporality, time, is employed by God to show us the immediate and long-term effects of our choices. This constitutes our incredible spiritual education in good and evil, right, wrong, true, false. Everyone is invited to learn. Everyone equipped to succeed from day one. Our ample capacity for these things totally innate. In fact, you really have to try to get life wrong. You have to strive to go on burying your head in the sand and keep burying it, entombing it in the carnality of life. And this ridiculous ongoing process is what we call selfishness. Me, me, me. And selfishness consistently leads to transgression, and transgression to evil. Why? Why do people of decency transform themselves into spiteful ghosts? Insubstantial, unthinking, uncaring. They weren't born that way. No one ever has to be like that, so why? To help answer that question, consider another old-fashioned word, unrighteousness. What does that word mean exactly? In a modern dictionary, unrighteousness simply means not right, wicked, sinful, unjust, unfair, unmerited, as you might imagine. But if we check back with our old friend Noah Webster in his marvellous 1828 dictionary, he tells us what unrighteousness used to mean for 1,000 years. He tells us unrighteousness is injustice, a violation of the divine law, or the plain principles of justice and equity, wickedness, And he goes on to say that unrighteousness may consist of a single unjust act, but more generally, when applied to persons, it denotes an habitual course of wickedness. Did you catch that earlier bit, though? Violation of the divine law. Unrighteousness is a violation of divine law. And theologically, I would say that is a sound and accurate definition. Quite different, though, isn't it, from the modern dictionaries which omit all of that stuff. Many people slide into spiteful ghostery because they are afraid of reality. And when you fear the objective world of the real, you only really have two choices. The first choice is that you go into it, you dive into the heart of life, and find out why it's so bleak and weird. You confront your own fear, and you examine what the hell is happening in this world, which anyone can do. The second choice is that you just permanently turn your back on reality, and you fill the void with various circus acts and illusions. You stop thinking about stuff in any substantial way. And when the satanic world asks you to support its inversions, you do it. There are no other choices. Investigate why reality is bleak and weird, or forever run away. Play on the merry-go-round instead. Most people choose the latter. Their fear of the real world and all its disemboweling misery gets the better of them. And so they initiate an ongoing autonomic rejection of truth in themselves. They deny their sacred pilgrimage and instead concentrate all their efforts onto their own relief and refuge. They craft a life where the desires of self overrule everything else. A life of world focus. World focus always involves diverting and medicating, interring self in families, careers, projects, traditions, prestige, celebrity, sports, arts, travel, meth, prostitutes, vintage claret, Chopin, beer, football, croquet, boating, whatever. Just so long as conditions are created that make sure there's no juice left. No mental, emotional or physical juice left for any real inquiry, or worry, or guilt about disowning reality. And instead just endlessly evacuate yourself into various commotions. To live like this, secretly or openly, is a violation of divine law. Purposeful non-attendance and contempt. Of course, such iniquity is now so normative in contemporary culture that perpetrators find it surprising, ridiculous, amusing that they are in any way considered as conducting themselves improperly. In their world, wrongness is an obsolete concept. On the contrary, unrighteousness is in vogue. Deviance, inversion, no problem. And so a person convinces himself that to neglect and denounce the sacred education that was so lovingly set before him by God is okay. Forget all that. There are no absolute higher powers, no standards. Just enjoy life for yourself. Do whatever you like. When a veil is lifted, there is a burning. When a truth is unfrozen, a shroud dissolved, a shadow illumined, you will burn. Burning brings pain, Because of this pain, many people abdicate truthfulness. They don't want the scorching that arises from touching it. They will do anything to avoid it. Anything to shun the least tiny sparks of truth, let alone the grueling incinerations from rending veils. For gentle people, the evasion of burning truth, honestly, is often a matter of self-defense. It is a semi-conscious tactic for protection, survival, coping, believing they are too fragile to face the pain and sorrow of reality. The sincere man leaves veils of illusion well alone. No rending, no burning, no pain. That's what they think. And what sensitive person among us would fail to understand and sympathize with such a strategy? Gentle, world-focused people only tend to hurt themselves. For vulgar people, denying truth is a much more active scheme of inversion. They even fashion new veils to further conceal and disfigure the world. Vulgar, world-focused people hurt other people as well as themselves. For all world-focused people, the burning that attends raw truth is unwelcome. And whatever purifying and untangling and straightening that suffering achieves spiritually, it is undesirable. They don't want the citadel of self to be eroded. This castle they formed around themselves, constructed from bricks made of false perceptions, unruly feelings, and childlike concepts. It's very important that this structure is preserved, even though there are more bad bricks than good. This is the stimulus behind those who rush out and support the current thing, rashly, heedlessly, without due investigation. The current thing is for lovers of self. More bricks for the castle. Prodding of pestilence into the sacred vessel, racial quotas, sexual deviance, climate garbage, fake wars erasing history, demolishing heritage, increasing the inversion, lies, wrongness, corruption, more profane travesties bricked in. Some bad bricks appear quite feasible and even desirable. Things like oneness, manifesting, magnetization, co-creating reality, social justice, positive thinking, non-duality. But I suggest to you that not only are those things false, but they are also destructive. As indeed generally can also be said of a life devoted to personal fulfillment, self-expression, self-realization, self-actualization, living one's dreams, immersion in one's own incredible magical journey. Me, my life, my reality, my dreams, my rules, me, what pleases me, what calms me, what satisfies me. This is the opposite of a spiritual life. Some people perform self-glorification with books and videos and imbibing various systems and dogma and techniques and whatnot. And some do it with oils and ceremony and shamans and plant medicine, ascended masters and spirit guides, galactic consciousness and whispers from the quantum singularity. People suffering from neo-pagan sci-fi amethyst crypto-gothic dyspepsia. To live like this is a shameful, self-indulgent denial of what is real. It hurts the pretenders themselves, the people close to them, and crucially, it grieves God to see his children piss away their dignity and life force in this tawdry manner. You see, deep down, pretenders know they're pretending. They know it's all staged. It's all artifice. They know that. But so long as their castle is intact, they don't particularly care what it's made of. The wokesters, the relativists, the New Agers, the transhumanists. Pretending. Just keep living the lie and surround yourself with other people who lie in a similar fashion. And after a while, you almost forget it's not real. you almost forget it's all one big dirty lie. You just feel safe inside your bad bricks. So it is that when a person adopts deception as a way of life, they become a liability. And though they often submerge their self-harming in the gloom of their own disgrace, it nonetheless continues to affect everyone and everything. Their lies hurt the world. Sin. Never be afraid of old words. Don't let bad churches spoil good language. It's not their language, it's ours. There are about 25 different Hebrew and Greek words for sin. Words you come across in scripture, in pseudepigrapha, in mystical texts, many places. Sin essentially expresses different classifications of deliberate misconduct. Words like chata and hamartia, missing the mark and doing stupid things. Words like paraptoma, avon, asebia, parabasis, more serious transgressions against natural order and morality. And words like animos, pesha, adikos, graver forms of intentional, ungodly violations and degradation. So sin represents a sliding scale of various intentional acts of error and stupidity, then acts of transgression and corruption, and finally acts of degradation and evil. The basic equation is that uncorrected error leads to dysfunction, and uncorrected dysfunction leads to depravity. Everyone alive is subject to this spiral of annihilation if they live for self. When desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived. For me, learning from the worlds of esoteric and classical theology, I see a very fascinating and critical thing about living in error. And I think I understand why Christianity makes such a big deal about sin. Sin damages the world. It harms the living classroom and all the students within it. It erodes the energetic structure. It hurts people and nature. Sin damages the fabric of space-time, causes a profound metaphysical imbalance. So God must admonish those who produce it. Fallen angels, errant demons, bygone Nephilim, weird elementals, and humans. He warns us, instructs us in goodness by way of our moral conscience, which is totally inborn, in mind and heart, factory installed, you might say. If you heed that moral conscience, you won't go far wrong. But if we ignore it, which so many people do, finally God must eradicate the sin, along with anyone who unapologetically keeps spewing it. So this is why most people who don't accept the love of the truth, who care only for their own backyard and block their ears to God's calling, are in very serious trouble. We do it to ourselves. In accordance with your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself. And this destruction will be executed upon the self-worshippers on the last day of space-time by the perfect rebalancing and immaculate judgment of the Creator. Scum is the impure foam that forms on the surface of a liquid, usually as the result of a process like boiling or fermentation. Scum is extraneous, useless refuse. And the word is derived from very old European words like schuma, skooma, schaum, skew. And as you know, of course, it's been used as a slang term to denote bad people. Persons who have become, for one reason or another, worthless. Potent words that make some people recoil, because it all sounds so damning, so hostile, so judgmental, so severe. But I like it. I like it because it provokes and it raises a legitimate inquiry. Can a person ever truly make themselves worthless? It grieves God to see his own children make themselves evil. And if evil, did they remove their own worth? In a document from 900 BC, ascribed to King Solomon, we read the following. A worthless person, a wicked man, is someone who walks with a deceitful mouth, who, with perversity in his heart, continually devises evil, who spreads strife. And to this man, his calamity will come suddenly. Instantly he will be broken, and there will be no healing. Around the same time, we hear more about worth and worthlessness in these very lovely passages, possibly authored by a couple of guys, Nathan and Gad. He who rules over men righteously, who rules in the reverence of God, is as the light of the morning when the sun rises, a morning without clouds, when the tender grass springs out of the earth, through sunshine after rain. Truly is not my house so with God? For he has made an everlasting covenant with me, ordered in all things and secured. For all my salvation and all my desire, will he not indeed make it grow? But the worthless, every one of them will be thrust away like thorns, and they will be completely burned with fire in their place. If a man chooses to walk a path of worthlessness, it is in his own footsteps, no one else's. The free agency given to all of us allows for that self-destruction. Man or woman, young or old, sage or simple, European, African, Asian, ancient, modern, happy, sad, no one is born as impure foam. We are born in the image of the Creator, with extraordinary heritage and ascendancy, little acorns, encoded to become mighty oak trees, regal, strong, beautiful, natural, spiritual, even amid fallenness. God calls us every day. He says, "Hey you, beloved child, listen. Please accept my invitation to join my divine family. Love what is true, love goodness, love each other, love me, care about good and evil, embody the grace I have revealed to you and made you empathically inclined towards. If you are alive, you have been invited to be part of God's family. If you are alive, you are being called every day. No one is made worthless by anyone or anything except themselves. I have seen extreme benchmark instances of men and women subject to the most extreme horrors, things you will never have to experience. And these people did not sink into worthlessness or evil. They resolved to personify deeper grace and virtue than ever before, to overcome their anguish and mutilations inside and out, and reach new heights of humble service, restorative goodness, outstanding divine endeavour. Just wise, gentle, loving, hardy, wonderful people. Devoted though, clear, unstoppable, worthy. I recently listened to a local Native American Indian guy talk about worth. He was a good man. His tribe, the Makah, Makah, have lived up here where I live, in the northwest peninsula region of Washington state, for a very long time. And he talked about being clean. How his fellow hunters needed to be clean in mind, clean in body, clean in spirit, before they were worthy of bringing animals home. The whales, the seals, the elk, the deer, the fish. The animals that provided them with food and clothes and oils and tools for 5,000 years. For the hunters, physically, that meant no alcohol, no drugs, no sugar. And he emphasised this macabre man, how sugar clouded their judgment and perceptions. And the cleansing principles also extended to their tools, their weapons, their clothes, their bodies. A very sombre and methodical consecration. And no one else was allowed to touch their equipment. No one could sing their songs. No one could know their techniques. They were sacred. Special, as he put it. If unclean people touched their things, it would drain their power. And every hunter had to purify his own body and spirit in the river every day to be worthy to pray to the Creator, to God, as he himself worded it. And this macabre man said that if the hunters were clean enough, worthy enough, his words, then God would make it so the animals would come home with them, that the animal's spirit would actually want to return with them, through them, despite the rigours of the hunt. I liked the emphasis he placed on the preparatory steps, as well as the hunt itself. You had to be clean, you had to be worthy to have the honour of bringing animals home. And every single part of the animal, of course, was respected and utilised. The meat, the organs, the bones, the teeth, the oils, the scales, the furs, the skins, the sinew, the hooves, the fins, everything. And God was thanked for this lifelong sacred provision over everyone's lifetimes. And all of this, he told us, this man, needed a worthy man, in harmony with himself, with the Creator, with the land, the plants, the animals, the ocean, the sky, worthy. Worthiness is a choice, a free choice. The bestowal of free agency upon humans by God is a critical factor in the divine project to create a celestial family. With free will, we can either respond to the permanently radiating heavenly call, or choose to disregard this grand entreaty altogether. And we make this choice by either valuing truth and divinity or not. Everyone alive receives the divine call. It is in our bones. It infuses our spirit. We are called by the divine like an eagle is called by the wind, like a whale by the ocean, like a horse by the prairie. It is our natural atmosphere. We are built to come together in this great calling. The Greek word ekklesia means the assembly of those who are called out from the world and toward God. In Christianity, this group of people is referred to as the mystical body of Christ. Every time you come across the word ekklesia in Scripture, it is translated into the English word church. A massive difference between the beautiful mystical body of those responding to the heavenly call and the crudely malformed religiosity of the institutionalized church. Two very different things. Most churches I've ever been to, I'm very sad to say, are way off base. Some through naivety and daftness, and some more culpably through their arrogance, through their self-regard, through sometimes evil. And some denominations do way better than others, but we won't get into that right now. As humans, we must turn our attention to living well. No one hands that to us. We have to just start doing it off our own back. To get in spiritual shape. To be unadorned, reverent, sincere. Not in outward appearance, that is of no value, but of course rather inwardly. To withdraw from reflexively prioritizing oneself over everything else. To establish divinity as the northward orientation in all matters, first and foremost. In a manner of speaking, all spiritual practice is for the purpose of approaching God with humility. Propriety is consonance with divine principles, morality, social customs. It is graciousness in behaviour and language. Decorum, restraint, dignity, benevolence, perspicacity. Always genuine, never affected. Composed, not clumsy. Considerate, not selfish. To my mind, propriety is a hallmark of a genuine spiritual life. It makes life better. To behave well is incumbent on all good men and women, from childhood onwards. And it isn't just the rudiments of politeness and comportment I'm talking about here. It is also the qualities of speaking, writing, listening, thinking, expressing, the tone of voice, the motion of the body, facial expression, kind-heartedness, trustworthiness. All part of propriety. To behave well is a gift to society. It makes your home, your family, your community, your whole culture better. To behave well is a sacrament, a mark of respect to God. Where I live, in a little semi-rural development of about 35 houses, part of a small coastal town, people know how to behave pretty well here. They're quiet, considerate, polite, orderly, nice people. And there's a basic responsibility and sensitivity to people's everyday conduct. So, accordingly, it's pleasant here. And that harmony is mainly due to the decency of the people who live here. And the landscape, of course, plays a role itself, being all nice and green and natural and lovely and everything, but to a lesser extent than the people who inhabit it. When I perceive dark, ugly, hostile places, unsavoury, incoherent, urban environments typically, I see the same principle at play. The unpleasantness in those places arises from the people, not the stone and the steel and the wood and the glass. We anchor the tone of our geography. We must take responsibility for ourselves. Regardless of bad parenting, bad education, bad religion, bad culture, we can't go on blaming someone else. It's never our fault, it's always someone else's fault. We can't do that. There is no worldly enemy who is the cause of all our deficiencies. We have to take stock, own whatever mess we have, from whatever sources, and actually do something about it. Do something to change it, to uplift, to heal, to strengthen oneself, by your own hand, in alliance with God. Change. Become good. Become moral. Become honest. Cultivate propriety. People who set their heart against truth, you will notice, almost always exude impropriety, a fizzing animosity against the world, against themselves, against God. You can feel their sourness and proud ignorance. And there are lots of colourful derogatory English words for these kinds of people. Pagans, heathens, churls. The word pagan, of course, from paganus, paganus, simply means a sort of rustic villager, an ordinary country-dwelling civilian. And over time, this word started to give the impression of a provincial simpleton. So whilst technically it just meant a country person, very neutral thing in itself, it was, in practice, used to infer something disparaging. Stupid people, basically. The word heathen, from the ancient words haithana and hedhin, suggests a person who dwells far from God. Originally someone who just literally lived on a heath, as in uncultivated land, a heathen. But again, in slang usage, it implied someone who lives unnecessarily in a primitive state, in order to justify their willfully vulgar and selfish behaviour. And it was suggested in the Century Dictionary in about the 1890s that though pagan and heathen meant very similar things, pagans are in fact a little more civilised, despite their worship of false gods, as we see with Greeks and Romans, etc. Heathens, on the other hand, are more directly offensive and uncouth in their idolatry, so it says, their superstitions and their disgraceful human and animal sacrifices. They were people who, even when presented with better choices in life, to set about just in their own way however they wish, often still stubbornly refuse them in favour of maintained moral turpitude and often outright vice. A churl, originally spelled C-E-O-R-L, pronounced cheol, and later became churl, C-H-U-R-L, was a term for, and I quote, a rude, ill-bred person. Technically, a freeman of the lowest rank in Anglo-Saxon England. Slightly above the servile classes, but not much. And by around the 14th century, a churl just meant, rather like a heathen, a blunt, coarse person, entirely disinterested in self-betterment and propriety, even within their own home and family. In other words, they were discourteous and abrasive with each other. And of course we see the connection to the word churlish, meaning having a bad disposition or surly or intractable. Despite what used to be called one's station in life, no one is fated to be a heathen or a churl. And if God planned for a person to start life surrounded by such people, they don't have to remain there. No one does. Every day you can go your own way. You can take a horse, you can take a bus, you can take a train, get in the car, get on a plane, change, leave. There is no such thing as privileged and underprivileged spiritual life. No one is entitled to any special treatment under God's levelling gaze. You are invited to walk with God according to the challenges He set for you. Some do so barefoot, and some do so in nice shoes. Some walk alone, some with others. Some live off the land and some live off supermarkets. Some watch the rolling ocean and the birds in the trees, and some watch cars on the highway and stare at pixels on a screen. I've done all of those things. Makes very little difference in the end. God calibrated your beginning circumstances to challenge you in particular ways. How you proceed, where you go, how you equip yourself is up to you. Over and over again, when examining the human heart, I see that to make oneself good and conduct oneself well is always choice. No matter who, no matter where, no matter what. And to make oneself corrupt and conduct oneself poorly is also a choice. No outside circumstances ever make that choice for us. External conditions challenge us, yes. Influence us, test us, prove us, yes. That's exactly what they're for. That's what the whole bloody earth is for. Proving. To ascertain truth by real-life field testing, we make the choice. It is crystal clear to me that the classroom battlefield of earth is a proving ground. Our duty, our work, our job is to absorb the inherent spiritual education in life and sustain ever-deepening goodness and truthfulness in ourselves. And when we live in this way, we come to divinity. Naturally. Whatever you think it's called or not called or how it works, it happens. We start to actually love God. And what does it mean to love God? Well, as we said at the beginning of this recording, to love God is to explore His nature and being, to get to know all about Him, to appreciate Him, to heed His calling like you've never done before, to comprehend His beautiful teachings, and above all, to nurture an actual relationship with this divine creator entity. If someone is not doing these things, then what are they doing in life? They are like chaff, which the wind drives away. COVID was not a dangerous pandemic that swept the world and mortally threatened us all. Scientists did not properly identify a virus in humans or connect it to a disease. The testing was, therefore, invalid. The injections did not prevent infection, transmission, or prevent the symptoms of the supposed disease. Any honest person can verify all these things. This is not opinion, these are just facts. Some bad things happened, all right, but not that. Not the virus and vaccination story. What of the science? What is science? Science is the observation of phenomena, looking at stuff, measuring things. Science theorizes how things might work, not why, not for what purpose, and can never say for sure how things work. Only theorize. Like everything else, science does not have special access to reality, or special powers of discernment, much as Empire would love us to think it does. It's all just theoretical models in the hands of fallible people, like everything else in life. Science is not a hard thing, it's a pretty soft thing. And the value of that elasticity is fatally degraded if important data is withheld, or data is manipulated, or people are coerced, or there's biased cherry-picking of studies, or there's social conditioning and scaremongering, or censorship of alternative views. And with COVID, all those things incontrovertibly took place, all of them. Which again, any honest person can verify for themselves. COVID has proven that science, in the hands of dishonourable people, is worthless. It is not science at all. So it is with governance, with politics, with the news media, with culture. In the hands of dishonourable people, these things are worthless. So why would anyone dream of agreeing to hazardous injections from scum organisations like Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson? Why would anyone support disingenuous groups like BLM or ACLU or Antifa or the Democrats? How is anyone not understanding that the Democrats are a party of inversion? They have orders to actively destroy America, just like Trudeau, Merkel, Macron and all those other people. These people are scum. And still you see ordinary people supporting these ridiculous things and people, putting horrid little badges and stickers on themselves and their vehicles, venality signalling. What world are they living in? The reason these people can so fatally ignore reality is because they value a portrait of their own life over the reality of life itself. A medicating, denying, unnatural portrait. People negating what is real. How can I love these enemies of reality? I need not, nor can I, condemn anyone. I don't know their souls. I can only observe their injurious behaviour. They are destroying the classroom by living willfully in opposition to truth. They are disrespecting the divine teacher. They could change. They could. So I pray to God for him to restore them, to uplift them, to show clemency, to wash away the poison in their minds, to heal their hearts and their bodies, and draw them to truth. This is how we love our enemies. We do not love them by ignoring their stupidity or sanctioning their destructive illusions. No. We do not love them by avoiding conflict or being afraid to offend. No. If they are offended by the truth, that is on their shoulders, not ours. We act with maturity, diplomacy, humour, strength, grace, but do not countenance falsehood. Speak truth, graciously. Teach by example. Embody solid, rational, mature poise. In the best way we can. I think, on occasion, when an otherwise decent person is engaged in really stupid, counterfeit, destructive things, like the usual fake medicine and politics and fake gender and racism and all that, I can sometimes detect the divine hand of the teacher working elegantly and generously in the background on their behalf, from above, as you might say, the decent person is receiving intense personal tuition in discernment, in pain, in guilt, in emptiness. They are being invited to suffer out their falsehoods. An educational pathway that, if heeded and integrated, could be instrumental in their spiritual regeneration. All they need to do is come to their knees, literally or figuratively, and acknowledge there is a higher truth outside and above themselves, greater than they. And that creator is asking them to love what is true and good. Simply that. Perhaps they will finally be humbled and sobered and inspired by the magnificence of it. Such an intimate spiritual process as this is strictly between the individual and God. So leave them to it. It is hard to look at unveiled reality. It is disturbing to acknowledge that the governing bodies of the world are acting against our well-being. I get that. And that they've done this for thousands of years. It's just unthinkable to the regular person. So these empire administrators, variously, are either wholly evil, they willingly side with evil, or they obey evil for their own advantage. Whichever, all such degrees of alignment constitute worship. Worshipping evil. Giving mental, emotional, physical and energetic consent. Agreeing, approving, confirming, advocating. Worship. Evil requires this worship from ordinary people. And of course, consent is amplified and harvested through social conditioning in the media, the news, the TV, staged fraudulent popular movements. They ask people to choose evil. And the more absurd and bizarre and perverted the object of worship, the more high-voltage life force they can elicit from the worshippers. World worshippers have the mark of the beast. The mark being a pledge of allegiance. A mark obtained through repeatedly and unequivocally sacrificing one's inborn divine gravitation in favour of a contract with the world system. A contract of renunciation, of acceding will to the world. The mark is burned into the soul over many years, cannot be received by accident, or technology or deception. Its indelible seal is engraved only through habitual collusion with evil, knowing something is wrong and keeping on doing it. Even if you don't know what Satan is, or believe in all that supernatural stuff, it makes no difference. With or without a person's knowledge or belief, Satan is the spirit being behind the corrupt world system, the adversary. Satan, the Satan, that's what it's for, the adversary. To harvest people, to tempt them. And when you serve the fallen world, you serve the tempter of this world and take his mark. We just witnessed 180 world governments lie to us, along with all their crooked institutions. They conspired together to hurt us. They colluded, they lied, and they knowingly injured and murdered us. If you're fine with any of that, that's worshipping evil. And we read in Revelation 14, "Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and burning sulphur, in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends for ever and ever, and they have no rest day or night." The forehead signifies belief. The hand signifies action. What you think and do. The mental and physical aspects of how a person gives worship. The fire and burning sulphur are real. Cataclysmic supernatural fire will consume everyone on the last day of time, physically and in spirit. the entire earth and astral realm engulfed in an inferno of annihilating heat, all time and space destroyed. Everywhere, forever. The 3D gone, permanently. Consumed in heavenly fire. Those who love the truth, love goodness, love God, will be purified, transformed, translated, glorified by this fire, and go onward to a new earth. The dishonest, who have no care for anything other than self, will be condemned and destroyed. We do it to ourselves. We choose eternal life or everlasting destruction all by ourselves. No one did it to us. The Creator officiates, confirms, rubber stamps, and executes the judgment we brought upon ourselves by the way we lived and the choices we made. The final sentence is carried out in accordance with our own inner state, the perpetual lifetime registry of the inner heart. A perfect lifespan recording of what we really think and feel inside. It is in our very own everyday invisible acts of free will, conscience, thought and feeling that we determine our ultimate fate. You don't become evil by making a few ill-informed decisions and falling for Empire's tricks. You become evil, as we say, through years and years of secretly placing yourself over everything else. Whether you are a nice, law-abiding, civilized, cultured person, or a crude, scornful, corrosive twat. Selfishness is the violation. Selfishness is the root of all sin, all depravity, all evil. To live for a few ephemeral decades uncaringly outside of God is to sentence oneself to unending oblivion outside of God. It is simple, dreadfully simple. The selfish man always reveals himself. He cannot help but insist upon his own rightness and everyone else's wrongness, unless they agree with him. Whether defensive or belligerent or both, he is always interminably blaming. Sad. God calls us to walk with him every day. This unimaginably resplendent seventh-dimensional omniscient ultra-being who created everything makes a personal appeal to you every day. Little you, with all your silliness and wonderfulness all mixed up together in one blob of strange treasure. You. God's plan is the creation of a celestial family, raising humans upwards into another higher dimension. The earth is the 3D training phase of that plan, to see if you love what is good or not. To this end, he endows us all with free agency, and he watches to see what we do with it. And if you use this power of free will wisely and decently, you get to keep it forever, ensouled in divinity from him, with him, in a new earth and a new heavens, a real home, outside of time, therefore forever, where life truly begins. God is making a family and giving them a new world, and if you're alive, then you've been invited to be part of that family. And that's the only reason Earth exists, to find the people who want to be with him and care to go onward, of their own free will. Whatever you call him, Source, Yahweh, Big Juju Man in the Sky, the Governor, the Lord of Hosts, Heavenly Father, whatever, I call him God, for short. God asks us to walk with him. That's all. And whether you do so silently or loudly or publicly or privately or feverishly or solemnly is up to you. No one can ever say, though, that they did not hear the call. You can ignore it, you can bury it, you can pretend it doesn't exist, and you can get into the rather ruinous habit of plausibly denying it, cauterizing your conscience. But no one can ever say they did not receive the call. They did. Thousands of times. Even if it were only once a day, over the average lifetime, that's about 30,000 days. To engage with your divine destiny, to heed the quiet yet definite impulse to value what is true and good and beautiful, and to observe, to seek and honour the divine source of these emanations, as would only be natural, to esteem divinity. Once a lady asked me what it means to fear God. It sounded strange to her, and I told her that 9 times out of 10 in Scripture, the word fear is really the word revere, the Hebrew word yareh, and the Greek word phobos, often contextually mean revere or respect, honour, as opposed to straight fear. They do sometimes mean fear and alarm, like you'd feel from a bloody charging rhinoceros or a snake or a looming guillotine or something. But very often, the word fear in Scripture means reverence, theosabia, reverence for God, which is what I said to this lady who didn't get the scriptural references to fear, because they're not taught properly in church, of course. She told me that once she was on a sightseeing boat tour on the Pacific Ocean up near British Columbia, just north of me, and they were whale watching, and sure enough, this enormous, magnificent blue whale surfaced right near them, which is the largest animal on Earth. Absolutely massive, splendid creatures. And this whale stayed pretty close to the boat for about a minute, which seemed like an eternity to her, she said. And then it was gone. And she said this animal was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen and felt. Transcendently so. And it was scary too. So massive, so powerful, but so graceful, despite its immense supremacy. And the whole experience actually moved her to tears, to witness this rare and stunning being so intimately. And she said she could feel that it knew she was there. It knew there was this human, this woman, and was very accepting and very happy. And I said, imagine that with God times 1,000,000. A vast, majestic being, so staggeringly powerful in every sense, and yet knows and loves you attentively, wants to raise you up into a dimensional eternity to join him. Would it be natural for you to feel reverence for such a being? And she said, yes, it would. You know, we could talk about rigged elections and synthetic and CGI people and mind control and 5G and underground bases and tunnel systems. What space is? The shape of the Earth, 9/11, World War II, World War I, aliens, blue beam, and all kinds of things like that. We could do. Subjects that are quite fascinating when treated objectively and maturely. But all those things are not really my field. My field, what I'm most interested in and what I have most experience in, is trying to perceive the metaphysical vantage point of it all. And when I observe as lucidly and deeply as I can, I see that Empire is now out in the open. Unplanned from their point of view. Empire is conclusively and indisputably existent and exposed to any willing observer. And in this unprecedented exposure, it is the most unprotected and the most endangered it has ever been. Very discernibly so. As discernible as a stinking fish carcass waved in front of your face, for all to see, for all to smell. Yet, despite this spectacle of evil, despite the stink of it all, many people choose to shut their eyes and hold their nose, pretend there is no evil, no stench. They turn off their discernment, because regular people cannot process the scope of this problem. Think of it. The actual problem of satanic paedophile, pedivore inversion cults governing most of the world and soliciting the worship of ordinary people by way of extensive mind control programs. The sheer fright of it Millennia-old, uninterrupted human sacrifice networks exterminating babies, children, teenagers and adults, assaulting, torturing and murdering them every single day. And normal society passively condoning it through engineered stupor. Too much for Mr. and Mrs. Normal to trouble themselves to think about. Too frightening, too occultic, too shocking. So sometimes when you want to invite newcomers to an intensely hard truth, you give them a legitimate surrogate, a parallel issue that points in the same direction, a problem that is more physicalized, more digestible, more within the parameters of conventional vanilla society. And that substitute problem was COVID. COVID provided a golden opportunity for ordinary people to take a serious look at the evil world system. A first-class chance to look at the overarching reality we all live in. It exposed the fake governments, the fake elections, the fake science, the fake financial system, and the fake everything. And as expected, many people rejected the teaching, the opportunity. They didn't even feel being coerced into medicating themselves was anything particularly bad. Think about that. No one ever has the right to mandate medicine, ever. You get to choose how you look after your body. It is no business of anyone else's what you do with it. Unless, that is, there's another person living inside you. If a woman is pregnant, then it's not just one body anymore, it's two people. And make no mistake, zygote, embryo, fetus, that is always a human being in there, an individual, a person, a human, alive, growing, living inside a woman. So unless there's a grave medical problem, that human being deserves to see the light of day, just like you and I did. But we're not going to get into that right now, goodness me. We're talking about medicine being imposed upon a single individual in charge of their single individual body, and that person being coerced into imbibing something, anything. Easy rule of thumb, that is always wrong, always evil. You don't tell other people how to look after themselves medically, you don't. You may ask them, but you don't tell them. And on that point, it's remarkable to me that for the entire 2-year period of this spurious scourge we all witnessed, I personally did not directly encounter one single case of a person being forced to be injected. People were cajoled, persuaded, invited, pressured, threatened, but not forced. Some people were injected in hospitals, and many children were injected because the adults told them it was okay. That's abuse. But still, every adult I know, anywhere in the world, who got injections, did so voluntarily. They chose to do it. Even though it makes no sense. Even though all the freely available real data proves it's unnecessary and deeply unwise. But they chose to do it anyway. They closed their eyes and held their nose. Why? Because most people want to avoid the overarching reality. Not just COVID, everything. Everything in their lives. They don't want to see the truth that we all live in a withered hellscape, totally saturated in evil. They don't want to deal with that. Because if they did, they'd have an immediate responsibility to live in a very different way. Their work would have to change, their home would have to change, their relationships would have to change, their worldview would have to change, their whole life would have to change urgently. Also, most people don't want to recognize that we are being thoroughly tested and examined. Tested to see if we still endeavour for what is true, good, divine, even when surrounded by evil. Do we give up? Or do we turn the inner flame higher still? Advance our first-hand knowing of good and evil, sensible and insensible, worthy and worthless. Fortify our resolve not to become part of the impure foam. Give Satan a black eye every day by embodying the virtue of truthfulness, which he hates, which undoes empire. That's why empire hates Christianity, because it is a path to truth. Why do you think empire loves humanism, atheism, scientism, New Age, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, paganism? There is another side to this coin. Though many countless millions threw away their opportunity to see reality via the gateway of COVID, a great many other people seized on this revealing occasion with both hands. Millions and millions took hold of this giant, ominous psyop and used it to finally begin to face the truth. Slowly, but surely, day by day, beginning to look into the naked actuality of this warped, derelict, grief-stricken, sepulchral world. And start to navigate it in a real way for the first time, a noble way, a spirited way, as indeed we are divinely inspired to. Grateful to know, grateful to be here, to study, to serve God, for our spiritual family, past, present and future, for those slowly coming to truth, to understand, to attend, to love. My life is not my own. I am not my own. And yet he has given me so much freedom, such vast liberty, such deep autonomy and expansive latitude, that it sure feels like my own life. Mine to live in the manner in which I choose. I can't imagine what I'd do with any more freedom. Right now I can do anything I please, go anywhere, be with whomever I wish, and most people I know are in the same situation. If they put their mind to it, if they think truthfully about it, all of us are. We are okay, especially compared to humans at any other time in history, when most independent-minded people were actively persecuted, imprisoned, exiled, tortured, executed. Not just dealing with information wars and weirdness on the screen or having one's travel or social plans messed around with. I mean real persecution, burned, brutalized, impaled, decapitated, atrocious things that were pretty commonplace for many thousands of years up until very recently. Today we are freer and more capable than ever before. We have to remember that. Quickly puts things into a healthier perspective. And of course embedded within that freedom is a tremendous mission, which in this recording we're characterizing as saying to love the truth, to love goodness, to love God. The realization that we are inherently part of a godly alliance, in which an ongoing transformation of self is natural and necessary. Metanoia, complete renovation, in humility, in honesty, in gratitude. We need not wait for anything. We must begin walking now, even when the earthly destination is not entirely clear. Walk. Walk with your inborn noble spirit, even amid the squalor. Walk in love towards those who are seeking and asking. Walk in strength despite our fragility. Walk with God, and these things are possible. Again, as noted down 2,000 years ago, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. No one is left out, no one exempted, no one disregarded, no one is omitted from the divine call. All hearts and minds are uniformly summoned in holiness. Imagine a man living his whole life alone on a small desert island with just bananas and coconuts and palm trees and not much else, with his sense of divinity attained from observing the sun, the moon, the stars, the ocean, the wind in the trees, his inner life arising from the motion of his own moral conscience, from witnessing the natural rhythm of life and beauty and death and sorrow all around him, choosing goodness in himself, in trying to live, trying to survive, trying to eat, in resting and healing and knowing and watching, learning, feeling, thinking. In these things, does he have everything necessary to know God? Everything at his fingertips? Is he encompassed by God? Is he being called? Of course he is. Now picture a modern woman, say, in the 21st century, living safely and comfortably in a nice house with books and computers and food in the refrigerator, and vehicle to transport her anywhere, free time, a dial on the wall to make the place warm or cool, opportunities to organise life as she pleases, to do whatever kind of work she sets her mind to find friendships and romance, and striving to balance work and leisure and finances and study and relationships and spirituality. Does she have everything necessary to know God? Is everything at her fingertips? Is she encompassed by God? Is she being called? Of course she is. The sanctified provision of free agency imparted to all humans who ever lived is critical to God's plan of raising a spiritual family. Without free will, it's not really a family. It's a throng of robots. Ostensibly, they could all succeed in meeting God's requirements, of course, but it would be by virtue of his programming, not their will. They didn't choose him. You see, it's imperative to God that his children are bestowed with the same divine flame of creativity, of will, of liberty, of independence that he has. An echo of his sovereign voice reverberating in our heart. The power to decide, to elect life, worth, justice, virtue, truth. No books, no words, no philosophy, no doctrines, no talk, no ceremonies, no rituals, no liturgies, no Sabbaths, no beads, no crosses, no accoutrements are needed to know the divine originator. Nothing needed other than love, of truth, of goodness, of God. And this practice of loving, of understanding, of transformation is enormously supported by the constant physical presence of a perennially truthful materialization that is with us every day. Nature. You can usually hear it when you're listening to me. The habitat of Earth itself, the natural world. A living book of allegory and metaphor. A rich hieroglyphic treasure, declaring sacred knowledge and whispering the deeper mysteries, all of which are sourced to Source, the Creator. The sacred writing is in the ancient hills, in the falling leaves, in the waves touching the seashore, clouds drifting across the sky, in the radiant sun, in the soft, lucent moon, in the elegant plants and the graceful animals, in the stars. They all tell of hallowed life and its principles. Seed, root, vine, branch, birth, purity, growth, empathy, maturity, death, rebirth, resurrection, translation into light. Types and shadows of a greater world to come. All this can feel very far away when you're wading through the psychotic treacle of a truth-hating, despiritualized society. Yet it is in these days of accelerated decay that the ontological contrast is sharpened to its apex. The white, absolute. The black, total. There is no grey anymore. Neutral ground has vanished. Time speeds up. Finite evil decomposes. Billions of people destroy themselves through sanctioning evil in their own souls, succumbing to fallenness through their own conceit, becoming evil. The Creator didn't put evil here. Free will beings did, through elevating themselves over him. Satan, fallen angels, Nephilim, humans. They spend their whole lives conjuring evil into giant concrete slabs in a vain attempt to barricade themselves against God. Such is their shame. A faithful remnant choose otherwise. They go against the grain. They oppose the mainstreaming of evil, as was our challenge from the very beginning. They remove the fortifications. They suffer willingly as the old veils burn. They honour the Creator over themselves. The inborn light is sustained and renewed. In this exaltation, the soul is lifted from the quagmire. The old distortions vaporize. A new pilgrimage begins. Humble, honest, understanding, dauntless. To discern and speak truth. To uphold and embody goodness. To revere and love God.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Roamcast. Neil Kramer loves you. You heard clips from the following. Dialogue from the 1967 British TV show, The Prisoner. The song, Plateau, by Mosaic. The song, Formed by Glaciers, by Cubby, from the album, Ember. Both shared under a Creative Commons license. If you liked any of those clips, support the artists and go buy their stuff. That's all for now. See you again soon. Until then, we wish you a beautiful day.
Also, folks, just so you know, I'm fixing to check on these emergency lights, so don't nothing to panic about or worry about, but I'm just going to check them, so if you see them come on, they just know that I did it. Thanks. The third time it went off, it actually came on. We're actually going all the way up front, guys. Appreciate it. All the way up front. All the way up front.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome aboard flight 4692. As you see, we have maintenance on board. They're changing a light bulb in the exit row. Very important light bulb we can't leave without. As soon as they're done with that, we'll be closing up and we'll let you know any more updates.
You really think it's a light bulb?
I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry about that, guys, too. We tried to hold off on boarding. That way they could come out and check it out, but they sent everybody anyway, so we apologize.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to flight 4692 with service to Albuquerque. Looks like we're waiting on one more, and they're loading up the final bags. After that, we'll close up the door. Quick taxi out to the end of the runway from wheels up to wheels down. About 58 minutes. We're going to be going up 32,000 feet. Weather in Albuquerque, calm winds, good clear skies. Temperature's 13 degrees Celsius, which is about 56 degrees Fahrenheit.
The absurdity. The absurdity. The sound of freedom.